about problem with CPI, and then we'll move on to nominal and the real interest rates. So if you remember when we talk about GDP, the gross domestic product, so GDP overall is very useful but not perfect measure, right? Remember, there are many problems associated with GDP. So for example, GDP does not care about what? The environmental damage, right? So also CPI is not a perfect measure for cost of living. So let me give you the conclusion first. So CPI, Consumer Price Index, right, tends to overstate the true inflation rate. Remember, we can use CPI to calculate the inflation rate, right? How fast prices are rising over time. Because CPI is useful but not a perfect measure of cost of living. So the final conclusion is CPI tends to overestimate the true inflation rate. So for example, if you see the inflation rate calculated by using CPI is equal to 2%, so in reality, the actual inflation rate may be smaller than 2%. Why? Because there are several problems with CPI. So they are substitution bias, unaccounted quality change, and the introduction of new goods. So I can use iPhone to demonstrate all three problems associated with CPI. Remember how to calculate CPI. The government has to define a basket of goods and services bought by a typical consumer in the USA, right? So in this example, I only consider bread and juice. In reality, a typical American consumer needs to have a so-called cell phone, right? But in reality, what kind of cell phone do you need to maintain a decent quality of life or living standard? You can buy an iPhone, right? You can also buy a much cheaper so-called pay-as-you-go cell phone, prepaid cell phone, much cheaper. See, that's the problem. CPI does not care about pricey one versus cheaper one. So for example, a consumer needs to buy a cell phone, right? But with cell phone, if a consumer cannot afford an iPhone, but that consumer can still get a cell phone by what? By buying a much cheaper pay-as-you-go cell phone or prepaid no contract cell phone from either Best Buy or Walmart or Target. So CPI does not care about so-called substitution buyers. Consumers can substitute the cheaper ones for more expensive ones. In this case, consumers can substitute cheaper prepaid cell phone for more expensive iPhone models, just for cell phone. Second problem, unaccounted quality change. So when was the first iPhone released? That was back in the summer of 2007, almost 13 years ago, right? So over time, so you can see just from this Wikipedia, the price for each generation of iPhone is roughly the same, right? But over time, I think most people would agree, iPhone 11 Pro is a much better product than the first generation iPhone, right? At least the battery lasts longer, better quality camera, right? So that means over time, the quality for cell phone, iPhone, even for the same product, iPhone has improved a lot. But this quality change, quality improvement over time, again, is not captured in the calculation of CPI. That's the second problem. Next, introduction of new goods. Here, let me go to Bureau of Labor Statistics website. So for example, let me open New York City for an example. The US federal government started reporting CPI. It goes all the way back to at least the year 1914, right? So you can see the consumer price index for New York City in December 1914 is 9.9. But wait a minute. Was iPhone available back in the year 1914? Seems not, right? So that means over time, there are more new items introduced to consumer. So for the past decade, we can buy cell phone, we can buy iPhone. But 100 years ago, I don't think that people can If, for example, in the year 1914, right, people living in New York City, they can go to an Apple store and buy an iPhone back in the year 1914. See, that's the problem. Over time, many new goods are introduced to the economy, but CPI does not capture this change. So, for example, we may see some new item being introduced in the next decade, which we don't have them right now. And CPI does not capture this aspect of the change in our economy. So that's why they are the major problem with CPI. And overall, CPIs tend to overestimate or overstate the true inflation rate. The final point in our textbook chapter 11 is our nominal interest rate and real interest rate. So what's nominal interest rate? Here, this is the web page from a commercial bank called Wells Fargo. So we have savings account at the CD rates. That means if you want to open a savings account, right, at the Wells Fargo Bank in Laredo, Texas, for the basic savings account. So for example, you open a savings account, you put in $1,000. The bank is supposed to pay you some interest, right? What's the interest rate? The Wells Fargo is going to pay you 0.01% per year for the money you put in your basic savings account. In this case, I'll open a way to save savings account with a $25 minimum deposit. So this interest rate you see is actually a nominal interest rate. What's nominal interest rate? The interest rate you see in commercial banks. What is a commercial bank? So for example, Wells Fargo is a commercial bank. This interest rate, 0.01%, right? So that is a nominal interest rate for a basic savings account at the Wells Fargo. What's real interest rate? Nominal interest rate. This number does not care about what? Inflation rate. So for example, if the inflation rate in Laredo, Texas is 1% in the year 2019, then what's real interest rate? There's a relationship among the three. So real interest rate equals nominal interest rate minus what? Inflation rate. In this case, for example, what's the nominal interest rate in Laredo, Texas for basic savings account? 0.01%. Minus, what's the inflation rate? Suppose we know assume the inflation rate in Laredo is 1%, right? So minus 1%. So you can see a smaller number minus bigger number. The answer is at least a negative, right? Minus what? 0.99%. So the real interest rate in reality could be a negative number. In this case, minus 0.99%. So what does that mean? Even though you put money in a savings account at Wells Fargo, right, you are going to receive some interest payment. The interest rate in the market is very low. You can see 0.01%. But this number is only a nominal interest rate. But in reality, your money is losing power over time. Why? Again, because over time, everything is getting more expensive, right? So over time, your money, your $100 bill is losing what? The so-called spending power. Spending power of money. So this number minus 0.99%, that means assuming this number is true, if you put your money in a savings account in Laredo, right? In reality, you are losing the spending power of money. By how much? By 0.99% per year. So this relationship between real interest rate, nominal interest rate, and inflation rate. So The interest rate you see from most commercial banks, like this number, this is another interest rate for a different, this is a, I think it's a better savings account. This one is 0.05%, right? All those numbers, all these interest rates, they are nominal interest rates. How to get a real interest rate? You need to adjust this number by what? By inflation rate. Nominal interest rate minus inflation rate. The answer is real interest rate. And the real interest rate could be a negative number. If this number is negative, that means over time, you are losing the real power or spending power of the money. Again, why? Because the price rises faster than the interest rate you get, you're promised.